Go Hunt Live show hosted by Todd Nevins.
This is Todd Nevins, and I interview people that had seemingly normal lives and careers going, but they pulled the ripcord to epically reinvent themselves in order to pursue a life full of purpose and passion. This episode is sponsored by PrintDirtCheap.com. Jeff Chrisman, the founder of Print Dirt Cheap, and the crew there are rock stars when it comes to delivering top quality printing at a cheap price. If you've met me in the last 3 years and I handed you a business card, it was printed by Print Dirt Cheap. They're my online digital printing company for everything. They do banners, company letterhead, a ton of direct mail pieces, funky decals, even menus for restaurants, over 30 categories of printing products, and yes, business cards. And they do it fast and they do it cheap. Jeff has streamlined every little aspect of the business to provide the perfect user experience, delivering the best product in the industry. I have personally been to the offices and I have seen it firsthand. But see for yourself. Go to PrintDirtCheap.com and use promo code GoHuntLife and get $10 off of your order. Or if you want to get a sample of their work, click on Sample Pack and they'll mail you one out for free. Go to PrintDirtCheap.com, use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job.
And I think the long-term challenge, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, is the human aspect. So how do you find a team that can actually fly to Mars with just the four of them, deciding to leave the Earth, all their friends, all their family behind forever, that will be on Mars with just the four of them? I mean, Texas is pretty empty compared to Holland. There's places in the US that are even more empty, but I mean, Mars is 4 people on the planet. So to be there with just the 4 of them for 2 years, and then the second crew is joining them, that's such a huge psychological challenge. I think that in reality is Mars One's biggest challenge.
That is Bas Lansdorp. He wants to colonize Mars, and he's looking for volunteers to ripcord out of their lives on Earth and go. He is building a company that will send the first 4 people to Mars in 14 years to build a new society. But it's a one-way ticket. If you want to go to Mars, no problem. You're just never coming back. You're going to live there for the rest of your life. So he's been looking for future Mars settlers, and to date, over 200,000 people have volunteered. I talked to Bas in a coffee shop in Austin, Texas, so there's some background noise that you'll have to fight through, but I promise it's worth it. My conversation with Bas Lansdorp, CEO of Mars One, starts right now. Bas, thank you for jumping on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
Where are we at today? And just describe our view. Where are we sitting?
We're in a restaurant in Austin.
Out in the hill country.
It's beautiful here.
It's beautiful. How old are you? Are you married and do you have kids?
I'm 40 years old. I am married and I have 2 kids. One is almost 2 and one is almost 4 years old.
2 and 4. All right. And your profession and primary way that you make money?
I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mars One, and we're organizing a human mission to Mars.
All right. Most of the time I interview people that have pulled the ripcord to drastically alter their life. I know you've got a personal ripcord story that we're going to get into, but then also you're asking people to ripcord their lives off of Earth on a one-way mission to Mars to colonize that planet. Is that right?
That is right. We've been doing this since 2011. We published our website in 2012, and we opened the job vacancy for the first Mars settlers, and more than 200,000 people registered their interest.
200,000.
Yeah.
What motivated you to start and it's a nonprofit, which adds a whole nother level, nonprofit to take people and colonize Mars?
Yeah, let's do the why second. So I'll talk about the nonprofit first.
Okay.
Mars One is actually 2 entities. It's a not-for-profit organization that's organizing the mission and training the crews. But there's a commercial arm of Mars One Ventures, which has the monetization rights around the mission. And that's our way to attract investments into the company. It's listed at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. So it's a way for people to invest money into Mars One and make a return on their investment.
All right, so that company is also investing in other companies that brings in revenue and profit in a return for those investors.
Correct.
Okay.
So why, you ask?
Yeah, why?
So The idea for a mission to Mars started already a long time ago, like 20 years ago, when I was still a student of mechanical engineering. And I just wanted to go to Mars. And I'm Dutch, I'm not an American citizen. Back then, NASA was the only entity looking at going to Mars. So I thought, if I want to go to Mars, I can't apply through NASA, so I'll have to do it myself.
That was 20 years ago.
You had that 20 years ago, and I was a naive student. So I took some old plans from NASA, the Robert Zubrin's case for Mars, other studies. I adjusted them because I always thought it would be a mission of permanent settlement, a one-way trip. So I took out anything that had to do with return, made some estimates, worked on that for a couple of months, and then I decided that I actually needed to graduate. So I forgot about it again. Then a couple of years later, I was doing a PhD at Delft University, and I got the opportunity to work on a Moon-Mars habitat design workshop at the European Space Agency. And I was completely inspired about Mars again, so I picked up all my old work, improved on it a little bit, but then I decided I wanted to finish my PhD. And finally, I started my first company in wind energy, but the urge was always there somewhere in my head. There was this urge to work on this mission to Mars. And at some point in time, I decided to go for it.
So leading up to your ripcord, though, you got a normal, quote unquote, like normal job with a normal salary and normal safety and all of that. But you quit.
Not really. So I abandoned my PhD before I finished it to start my first company in wind energy. Which was also a little bit out of the ordinary. It's a company working on airborne wind energy, which is
what is that?
Generating wind energy with an aircraft attached to a cable. Okay. So one of Google's companies is actually also working on it. Makani, my former company, has a different approach. It's still there. There's when I left, there was 8 people working there, and now there's 50 people working there. So it's doing very well. But that also a little bit out of the ordinary. So I've always been an entrepreneur because I just like to do things my way.
And you sold your shares in that company?
Yeah, I sold most of my shares to one of the existing investors to have a starting capital for Mars One.
Okay. You started Mars One in 2011, and your plan now is to raise money and your first manned expedition will be in 2031. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's when they leave. They land 7 months later in 2032.
7-month journey. Okay. How much money do you need to raise to make this happen?
Well, the interesting thing is that Mars One has been around for 5 years now, and we know how the dynamics work of people that come to our website. So we've had about 17 million people on our website, and we know how many of them bought a Mars One T-shirt, how many bought a coffee mug, how many donated, how many applied to go to Mars. And we can show, and that's why the commercial company is there. So in the business case of the commercial company, we can show that if we start really making good progress, so all the contracts with the aerospace suppliers, hiring excellent team members, ex-NASA, ex-Lockheed, and if we start creating content about, for example, the humans that are going to Mars, then we become a self-funded, basically a marketing machine, a self-funded marketing machine, and both the foundation, which is running on donations, and the for-profit part of the company can fund themselves. So what we're raising now is 10 million to get everything going, and of that 6 has already been raised.
All right. And how many years out will 10 million get you?
We spend it in about a year, but at the same time we'll be making money from the revenue sources that I just discussed. So also ads on video content, partnerships, and that way we'll be cash positive in about a year and a half.
Okay, but you've got 4 missions planned, unmanned missions planned, taking materials there that the manned people, the settlers, as you call them, which is an awesome, like that's what they are. They're settling Mars. Of those 4, when is that first of 4 go?
The first one is in 2022. That's a demonstration mission, which will demonstrate some of the technologies that we need for the manned mission. So extraction of water from the Martian surface, the use of thin film solar panels on the surface of Mars. Both of them have never been done. So we need to demonstrate that, but also, of course, we need to demonstrate Mars One, And right now we're a team that does not have the experience of actually sending something to Mars. And we need to show that we can actually do that.
Okay.
And we need to expand our team. So NASA people who have actually already organized unmanned missions to Mars. People from aerospace companies that have built technology that has landed on Mars. So that's one of the most important steps that we want to start doing in the near term.
Okay, so how much will that first mission cost, unmanned?
The NASA version of that mission, it's a replica of the NASA Phoenix mission.
Okay.
And the NASA Phoenix mission costs about $400 million US dollars, so somewhere in that order of magnitude.
What if you fail to raise the capital? Like, what's your biggest risk that you're facing with the company?
At this moment, the biggest risk is the capital. So to raise the capital, to get that marketing machine going, to generate the funds that we need for the next steps, that's at this moment the biggest challenge. But I'm actually happy about that. I mean, there's so much money in the world. For money to be the biggest issue at this moment is actually good. I think in the midterm, it will be technology. So, for example, the first unmanned mission, it's a reflight of a NASA mission. We'll work with Lockheed Martin on that. They've also flown that NASA mission. So we're mitigating the risk as much as possible, but it's still a Mars mission. So there's still a lot of risk. Imagine that we crash the first unmanned mission. That would be very difficult for the company to overcome. Or there's some other technology challenges. So a scaled up landing system, suits that Mars settlers can use for extended periods of time that cannot be sent back to Earth for repair, but that they need to repair locally with spare parts. That's another. Those are two other really big technology challenges. And I think the long-term challenge, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, is the human aspect.
Sure.
So how do you find a team that can actually fly to Mars with just the four of them, deciding to leave the Earth, all their friends, all their family behind forever, that will be on Mars with just the four of them? I mean, Texas is pretty empty compared to Holland. There's places in the US that are even more empty, but I mean, Mars is 4 people on the planet. So to be there with just the 4 of them for 2 years, and then the second crew is joining them, that's such a huge psychological challenge. I think that in reality is Mars One's biggest challenge.
Before we jump into the human piece, I want to jump back a little bit. Have you partnered up with, you have NASA engineers and Lockheed people on your team already. What is the partnership opportunities with SpaceX and NASA and other organizations that you can team up and share technologies? How do those relationships work?
So Mars One is not an aerospace company. We are organizing the mission, but we'll source all the hardware from established aerospace suppliers. So we're in good contact with basically all the major aerospace companies, especially here in the US, but also in Canada and in Europe. But we want to have strict supplier-customer relations with them, because we want to have the flexibility of changing when necessary. So if there's another supplier with a better product or cheaper, then we need to be able to change. So with those kinds of organizations, we expect to have customer-supplier relationships. And partnership with NASA would be awesome. At this moment, we don't have that, but that would of course be great for Mars One. And we know that there's interest. If we're going to do a 2022 mission to Mars, and I'm sure there will be some kind of NASA involvement in that mission.
How do you account for, it's 2017, so the technology today is current. How do you account for what the technology will be in 5 years? Like, how do you plan for that advancement in technology and plan for it when you don't know what that's going to be?
We don't. So we try to take as much as possible existing technology when we design our mission, and then it can only get better.
Right.
Our entire mission is designed around existing technology, except a scale up in the landing system by a factor of 3 compared to what NASA has done to date. But that's a step that companies have performed for NASA in the past. We need that larger landing system, and we need a rocket that's as powerful as the Falcon Heavy. So right now, of course, it's never flown yet, but 3 Falcon 9s combined. So it's not a huge step in technology development, and we won't need it until 2026. So there's still quite a lot of time before we need such a large rocket.
Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Click Placement, a digital agency designing Google AdWords and pay-per-click marketing strategies for startups, small businesses, and even people building a side hustle. Hit up clickplacement.com to start a conversation. If you would like to personally support the Go Hunt Life podcast, go to patreon.com/Go Hunt Life to make a donation.
Okay, let's jump into the people aspect now. You had 200,000 people apply for this, but this is not going to happen until 15 years from now. But they're applying now. How do conversations go when you're talking to someone just like you and I, and you're asking them to, as you mentioned earlier, you're going to leave your friends, your family, everything that you've ever known in your life. You're going to get in a spaceship with 3 other people and go to Mars one way. How do you start, and how do those conversations go?
Well, don't forget that I'm not asking them to go. They have applied to be on one of the teams, so they are utterly motivated. I mean, you can only do this if you're utterly motivated. I'm sure that not all the 200,000 people who registered their interests were serious, but I know that they were now at 100 round 3 candidates, and these guys are very serious.
100 people.
Yeah, there's 100 people remaining in our selection process. We'll narrow that down to between 3 and 6 teams of 4 that we will start training full-time for the mission. We'll repeat that every year because we expect that many teams will drop out, either because they don't want to go anymore, or because they're not good enough, or maybe someone gets ill and can't go anymore. So we'll repeat that every year, and we'll grow the astronaut corps to about 10, 15 teams that are training full-time for the mission. So, of course, it's difficult for me to speak about their motivation, but maybe I can say a little bit about myself. So I started Mars One because I want to go to Mars too. And for me, the permanent settlement aspect is not an issue at all. Right now, I wouldn't go. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, almost 2 and 4. And I would not want to leave them behind. So even if they picked me up now for a flight to Mars, I would say no. But maybe when they're 14 or 18 or 21 or 30, I don't know, then I would still want to go. Before I had kids, I definitely wanted to go. And for me, it was the permanent settlement aspect was not an issue. It was actually one of the reasons for me to be interested. Because why would you go to Mars on a return mission if you can go there and work on a new society the rest of your life? We don't need tourists on Mars. We need workers, people that spend their entire life there. And today, in the era of infinite transportation possibilities, it sounds crazy to go one way. But 50 years ago, if someone in Holland told you, I'm going to New York, he probably meant that he just sold his house, quit his job, and bought a one-way ticket on a boat. And that's just 50 years ago. One-way travel used to be the standard if you were going to a different continent, and before that even to a different country. So it sounds very absurd today, but actually it's not absurd at all. And I think that the people who applied, the 200,000 people that applied to go to Mars, those would have been the same people that 100 years ago would have quit their job and bought a one-way ticket on a boat to Australia or North America or South America.
That's a great comparison. I had not thought about that. Of the 100 people, what are the most consistent backgrounds of these people?
It's everything. So there's all kinds of professions there, but scientists and engineers are the majority.
Do you want, out of just the 4 people, what type of perfect dynamic would it be? You don't want 3 scientists with the exact same background, because that only solves one potential problem. What would be the perfect scenario for 4 people going there?
Well, they don't need to be the best people, they need to be the best team. So it's all about teamwork. They are going to fly together for 7 months, they're going to be on the surface for 2 years, and they need to work together. Their lives depend on each other. So the team dynamic is actually the most important. Of course, we need healthy people, we need smart people, because we're going to teach them a lot of new skills. But we can teach anyone with a good brain to take the life support system apart and put it back together again with a spare part. We can teach anyone with a good brain to perform surgery on another person in case that's necessary, or to pull a tooth. So it's really the team aspect that we're looking for, and your training is secondary to that.
Do they have to pay?
Everybody that's finished their application paid a small application fee, on average about $25 US. In the US it was, I believe, $34 or $38. We did that actually at the moment people registered, the selection already began. So the first thing after registering was paying a small application fee, and about 90% of the people that applied already dropped out on that. Well, if you don't want to pay $25,
oh my gosh, you're not committed.
Serious. You're not committed, so you're out. Well, that saves a lot of work.
Sure.
Then people had to fill in all kinds of annoying questions, like what was the hardest moment in your life and how did you deal with it? You know, the really annoying things that you don't want to talk about. Then they had to record a video of themselves explaining why they want to go to Mars, what their sense of humor is. Well, nobody likes
their
to make a video
of humor. That's one of the factors.
That's so important. If in a difficult situation, it's the person with the good sense of humor that can save the situation.
Men and women?
Yeah, all our teams will be 50-50 because mixed teams are, if you give them time to train together, teams with different backgrounds, so men and women, old and young, the different cultural backgrounds, those are the best teams because they have the broadest base of experience.
Do you want them to reproduce?
Not too quickly. So when the first team lands on Mars, we won't know if it's safe. So we won't know if a fetus will develop in 40% gravity the same way as it does on Earth. There's good reason to believe they will, because there's been some research in 0G. Well, if it works in 0G, then it should work in 40%. But we don't know, and you can't take the risk. But maybe even more importantly, they're on a different planet with a small set of systems that's keeping them alive. You don't want a toddler running around in such a situation. It's just, it would be so. You would be such a bad parent to do that. And we will be sending very responsible people to Mars, so I'm sure that they won't want to do that.
What will be on the planet when they land in 2031? What structures will already be in place?
There will be a habitable outpost waiting for them. So the 2 years before the humans go, all the hardware for the human mission will go. 2 years before that, there's a rover mission that will select the right location and that will function as a beacon for the missions that are coming afterwards. So all the hardware will be there. Life support systems will have been working for 2 years before the humans are going. There will be water waiting for them, a breathable atmosphere. There's still a lot of construction that will need to be done. So we expect there to be different modules, and the modules will probably need to be interconnected by hallways, such that they can walk from one to the other. There will need to be more solar panels deployed when the humans land. Greenhouse equipment will need to be installed. So a lot of things will need to be done, but they can survive.
How do you create water there? And how realistic is the Martian movie? You're asked that a million times, I'm sure. How realistic is that?
Well, he returned, so from my point of view, completely unrealistic. We haven't talked about that, but that is really what makes Mars One feasible. So I think it's a waste to go return. I mean, it's just, if there's so many people that don't need to come back, why would you send people that need to come back? It's more infrastructure, it's more cost, more technology development, higher risk. But imagine how difficult it is to do a return mission first.
Okay.
It's about 5% of all rocket launches from Earth fail. They don't all explode, but 5% have their satellite end up in the wrong orbit. Well, if you're leaving from Mars back to Earth and you end up in the wrong orbit, it's better to explode on a launch pad because then it's quick. Okay. So if 5% fails from Earth, on average since 1990, so it's the recent ones, if 5% fails on Earth, how can we do it from Mars? I mean, there's hundreds of engineers checking all the systems at the last moment. It's a rocket that's been installed on Earth. We know exactly what happened to it. Now there's the Martian rocket. It's been launched from Earth with all the vibrations, that it's flown through the vacuum of space, that it's entered the Martian atmosphere. Again, there's vibrations. Then it's landing on the surface of Mars with some kind of big bang that we don't know exactly how big it will be. And then it's standing there for a couple of years without any maintenance because there's no humans on Mars yet. And then there's 4 people that are not trained to be rocket engineers, but they're trained as general purpose problem solvers. They need to solve everything that goes wrong. They don't just need to repair a broken rocket. And those 4 or 3 in some scenarios, how are 3 people going to prepare a rocket for launch? It's just ridiculous.
It's unrealistic.
It's impossible. It's completely unrealistic. And that is really what makes Mars One possible.
What is the biggest challenge? Is it oxygen, food, water, or something, gravity? Like, what's the biggest challenge?
On Mars, it's definitely psychology.
Psychology, the mental side of it.
The being on the planet, anything can go wrong at any moment. It's just like in a submarine. If something goes wrong, it's almost always dramatic. So that stress, they will need to deal with that. The interpersonality issues, the interpersonal issues. So I'll take you through an evening and a morning. So it's your birthday. You're on Mars. It's your birthday. You all have some drinks. You go to bed really late. It was a nice party.
You have alcohol on Mars.
Well, we will need to provide it. Otherwise, they will make it because they're growing plants. So we better give them safe stuff instead of them making dangerous stuff. So they've had their drinks. They go to bed really late. They wake up after an hour of sleep. The alarms are going off. The life support system is broken. So they need to fix the life support system. Otherwise, they die. So they've fixed the life support system. We trained them well so they can do it even when they're drunk. They go to bed for another half hour and then they have to wake up for their daily business. They open the door of their small bedroom into the living room and there's a huge smell, a foul stench. The toilets are broken. So you're hungover, you didn't sleep, and there's a huge smell in the outpost. And then you enter the living room and there's the sock of one of your teammates on the floor. And that's going to be the kind of thing that will create the biggest tension because they know that the life support system will fail. They know that the toilets will break because they always do. But it's the small interpersonal things. And in training, you've been able to deal with the sock because you're going to Mars, you're a team, you're sticking together. But in those kinds of scenarios, then something small like a sock on the floor that can create the big arguments. So we will test them on Earth. We will put them through these kinds of situations, and then we will see if those small interpersonal things break the teams up, or if they stick together.
When they are in when they're inside, it's oxygen. They're walking from room to room, bedrooms and living rooms, and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, just like in the ISS, basically, except they're not floating.
How frequently will they go outside of that to explore, research, what have you?
Yeah, we expect them to go outside every other day.
That's frequent.
If you go out every other day for 2 hours, then you stay below the acceptable radiation dose by even by the ESA standards, which are the toughest ones. So, of course, once you're on Mars, you're probably not going to care about that so much, but don't forget that 2 hours outside every other day or an hour on average per day is actually quite a lot. I'm sure that there are many people on Earth that don't get an hour per day really outside. I mean, you walk to your car, you drive to the office, you drive back home, and you watch TV. So a lot of people don't spend a lot of time outdoor. If you're an outdoor person, don't go to Mars.
But they're still in a suit.
They're not. Yeah, they will never be out. That's one of the long-term big challenges: sensory deprivation. So never feeling the wind in your hair. Well, you don't have any. I don't have a lot, but some people have that pleasure.
Yep.
So or after a long summer, there's this first rain and there's this particular smell in the air. You know that, right? Never again. there's the first snow in winter and you walk outside and you hear the snow cracking under your boots, never again.
Are there seasons on Mars?
Well, there are, but you won't hear the snow under your boots because you're wearing a suit and there's almost no atmosphere, so there's almost no sound on Mars.
But the temperature changes throughout the year.
Yes, it does. Yeah, so on a nice warm summer day, it can get slightly above 0 degrees centigrade.
Oh.
On a cold winter night, it can get really cold, like minus 150 centigrade. So very cold.
Are there we're right in the middle of multiple natural disasters going on here in North America. Are there natural disasters like hurricanes and tornadoes on Mars?
Yeah, the Martian dust storm is one of the biggest challenges for people going to Mars. There's no other natural disasters. So there's no earthquakes, there's no volcanoes, no live volcanoes anymore. So the dust storm is the only one. So fortunately, we can plan for it. There's a lot of experience with dust storms, so we know how much solar radiation still hits the surface. But it's definitely a big challenge.
Back to the company and what you've accomplished so far since 2011. Is there one major decision that you've made that you wish you could have a do-over on and make it differently?
Yeah, I think in hindsight is 2020. Yeah, so I don't regret making this decision. But in hindsight, I think we should have raised more money before we launched.
Okay.
The program publicly. On the other hand, by launching it so early, we've gained a lot of awareness, and that has made it easier to attract money afterwards. So maybe I would have looked for more money indefinitely, and failing to do so. So it's a difficult decision, but that's one. Actually, the other one would be to have a good CFO, a good chief financial officer from the start of the company. That would also have been very helpful.
What brings you to Austin, and what are you focused on? Let's say the next 6 months. What are your biggest thing that you're focused on in the next 6 months, and why are you here?
We're in the middle of a fundraise for Mars One Ventures, and I'm meeting a few investors and other people who can help us attract investments. So that's the main goal, and that's we hope to close that in about 2 months, this funding round. And after that, it will really be ramping up the activities in Mars One. So contracts with aerospace suppliers, hiring some really good team members that we need to expand the teams, both of Mars One Ventures and of the Mars One Foundation. And we want to announce the dates for the third round of the selection process, pick a location for that, and create some really cool content around that to increase the awareness for Mars One in the world.
If you could snap your fingers in an instant and solve the biggest challenge that wakes you up at night, what would that be?
Today it's really funding. So I'd really like the funding issues to be over. Also because I don't like them. So it's not only at this moment the most urgent challenge, but it's also that I'm not interested in money. I'm interested in moving the Mars mission forward. So I would really like to spend more of my time on the Mars mission again instead of on talking to investors.
All right, last question. You said earlier that you eventually will want to go to Mars, but let me turn this around. Let's say in 10 years, your 4-year-old is 14 and says, "Dad, I want to celebrate my 20th birthday on Mars. I want to go." What's your answer?
I don't think that anyone who's 20 years old is ready to make a decision to go to Mars. So we have people applying from 18 years old. And I think that's fine because we'll train them for more than 10 years. So they've got time to decide that they don't want to go. But I think it's very difficult to decide before you're 30 years old that you actually want to do this. Things will get easier on Mars. So when there's 10 teams, so 40 people, 50 people living on Mars, then I think it's less likely that you will make the wrong decision because life on Mars will be relatively easy. But the first couple of crews, they will have such a hard time. And I think if then you did not make the decision while being mature enough to really decide that for the rest of your life, then I think some of those people, young people, might get regrets, and you really don't want that.
In a perfect scenario, how many people are living on Mars by 2050?
Well, we will be sending 2 people per year, so 4 people every opportunity that you can go to Mars. So in 20 years, that will be 40 people. But I think that things will speed up. Once there are actually humans on Mars, I think things will speed up dramatically, and it can go a lot faster than that. So maybe by 2050, there could be 250 people living on Mars.
Okay. All right. You can find Bas at mars-1.com, also at Twitter at mars-1, and on Facebook, Mars1 Project. Bas, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, too.
Don't forget to hit up the rock stars at printdirtcheap.com. Use promo code GoHuntLife for $10 off of your next print job. For fast, cheap, and high-quality online printing, it's printdirtcheap.com. Hey, Life Hunters, thank you for listening to this episode of Go Hunt Life. If you like the show and would like to support it, go to iTunes and do this. Subscribe to the show, leave a rating, and review it. It helps. And thank you. If you or someone that you know has quit their normal life to follow their dreams, I would love an introduction and maybe interview them on the show. You can find me at GoHuntLife.com and also on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest at Go Hunt Life. Until next time, stay weird, dare greatly, and ripcord out.